What kind of laughter echoes loudest? The kind that mocks a powerless woman, or the kind that dies in a courtroom when she rises to judge the men who mocked her? Cops laughed while shaving a homeless black woman's hair. That is the first image burned into this story. Clippers buzzing. Laughter ricocheting off concrete. Dignity falling to the floor in tight black coils. They thought they were cutting shame into her scalp. They didn't know they were cutting their own rope. Her name is Ruth Arimah. No address, no advocate, no one to call when the cuffs bit skin. At least, that's what they believed. But the city knew another name, Honorable Ruth Arimah, the woman who once wrote the policy these officers swore to uphold. A judge who vanished from the bench months earlier after personal tragedy, walking the streets in quiet grief, unseen, until they chose to see her the way they see so many, disposable. This story moves like a storm front. First the drizzle, a routine stop turned ritual humiliation. Then the wind, an intake room where procedure is twisted into punishment. Then the lightning, a slip of the tongue, a live stream, a name spoken, too late. And finally the thunder, a courtroom where the balance of power flips so cleanly you can hear hypocrisy crack. You'll see how a city's secrets leak through body cams and burner phones. How an intake clerk with a conscience becomes the hinge of history. How the crowd outside grows from a handful of voices into a roar that rattles glass. And how a woman the world thought was broken gathers those fallen coils of hair into a fist and says, "This is not mine to carry. This shame belongs to you." There will be chaos, the calculated kind. Files unsealed at dawn. Uniforms traded for jumpsuits by noon. A union rep blinking against the light of cameras he used to choreograph. And in the center of it all Ruth, stripped, startled, then startling. Not a symbol, not a saint, just a human being who remembers the law even when the law forgets her humanity. If you believe justice is just a costume, this story will argue otherwise. If you've ever felt small under someone else's power, this story will take your hand. And if you think humiliation is the end of a person, wait until you see what grows in the soil of disgrace. Before we begin, if stories of courage against cruelty matter to you, subscribe now so you don't miss a beat, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is on your clock right now. Your city may sound a lot like this one. Now breathe in. Listen for the buzz of clippers, the swallow of a laugh that knows it's gone too far, the rustle of a courtroom standing all at once. When the laughter dies, the law begins. And with that, we step into the moment before the storm, where a pair of officers meet a woman they think they own, and a city's fate shifts by a single, careless word. The air in the county jail intake room was stale, heavy with disinfectant and sweat. A metal fan rattled above, doing nothing to cool the heat of cruelty. The fluorescent lights hummed like insects. Beneath them sat Ruth Arimah, wrists cuffed, sweatshirt streaked with rain and dirt, eyes steady in a face lined with quiet exhaustion. "Name?" Officer Danner barked, not looking up from his clipboard. "Ruth." "Last name?" "Arimah." He smirked. "Spell that." Ruth's voice was calm. "You'll learn it soon enough." Across from her, Officer Mills leaned against the wall, thumbing his phone camera into record mode. "Gotta document the contraband check," he said, smirking at his partner. "Policy, you know?" Danner grinned. "Yeah, policy." He circled her like a wolf that had already decided the end of the story. Ruth's hands twitched against the cuffs, not from fear, but from the memory of holding a gavel. The sound of the clippers snapped her back to the present, a sharp electric buzz that filled the room. "Let's start with that nest," Danner said, nodding to her thick coils of hair. "Could be hiding anything in there." Ruth raised her head slowly. "You know that's not procedure." "Procedure is what I say it is," he shot back. Mills lifted his phone higher, capturing her from every humiliating angle. "Smile for the camera," he taunted. "This one's going viral." She didn't smile. She met the lens like it was a courtroom gallery. Behind her silence was the weight of every woman who'd been told to be quiet, every protest turned into a mugshot. When Danner grabbed a fistful of her hair, his glove slipped against her scalp. "Hold still," he shouted. The clippers screamed. Coils fell in slow motion, landing on the gray concrete like pieces of night. Mills laughed. Damn, he said, look at this nappy mess. Haven't seen hair like this since basic. Ruth's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Danner leaned close, breath sour with arrogance. The mistake was you running your mouth when you got picked up. You people never learn. Her eyes flicked to the security camera in the corner. The red light blinked. Good, you thought. Let it see. You have no right, she said softly. He yanked another strip of hair free. I've got all the rights I need. Mills' laughter filled the room, a sound that would soon choke him. You think you're special or something? You're nothing but another stray the city's gotta clean up. Ruth exhaled slowly. Tomorrow morning, she said, her voice even, you'll understand what real consequences feel like. Mills snorted. Oh yeah? You planning to sue us from your cardboard box? Danner laughed too, but there was something uneasy in it. The way her eyes never wavered, the way her words landed like verdicts. The clippers buzzed on. Each pass stripped more than hair. They stripped pretense, exposing raw skin, raw truth. But the moment Mills said the wrong word, the air shifted. Yo, get this angle, her honor's about to lose her crown, he joked. The room froze. Danner turned sharply. What did you just say? Mills laughed nervously. Nothing, man, I was just... Her honor, repeated Thompson, the intake officer behind the desk. His pen stopped mid-signature. He looked at Ruth again, really looked this time. The posture. The diction. The composure. He'd processed hundreds of arrests. None like her. Wait, he said slowly. What's your full name again? Ruth's eyes met his. Ruth Arimah. He felt his throat go dry. You're Judge Arimah? The room went silent, except for the fading buzz of the clippers still running in Danner's hand. Mills frowned. Judge who? Thompson's voice trembled. Superior Court, Division 3. You idiots, you just shaved the head of a sitting judge. The words hung in the air like a dropped grenade. Ruth sat still, calm amid their panic. Continue, she said quietly to Danner, who'd gone pale. You started this. Finish it. He dropped the clippers. They hit the floor with a metallic thud that sounded like guilt. Jesus Christ, Mills muttered. This can't be. It is, Thompson whispered. And every second's on camera. Ruth stood slowly, hair shorn unevenly, but dignity unbroken. You thought my silence meant weakness, she said, eyes sweeping the room. But silence is just the sound before judgment. Outside the holding cells, murmurs spread. Protesters' phones caught pieces of the scene through barred windows. Within minutes, snippets hit social media. A woman with a shaved head, handcuffed, whispering the words, "Tomorrow morning, you'll understand consequences." By the time they realized what they'd done, the video was already climbing feeds, #Judge Arimah trending, captions like, "They humiliated the wrong woman." Danner's radio crackled. All units, stand by. Confirm identity of detainee Arimah, Ruth. His hand shook as he switched it off. Ruth turned to Thompson. Uncuff me. He hesitated. Your Honor, That's still my title, isn't it? He unlocked the cuffs. The click echoed. She rubbed her wrists where the metal had bitten deep. I want every recording, every log, every body cam file preserved. Danner swallowed hard. Ma'am, this is all a misunderstanding. No, Ruth said, voice level, this is a mirror. You should look into it. She walked toward the exit, slow and deliberate. Her reflection in the metal door showed a woman stripped bare, but unbroken. Behind her, the officers stood frozen, uniforms heavy as guilt. The reporters would later say the city changed that afternoon. But inside the jail, it began with something smaller, the sound of clippers dying mid-buzz, the sound of arrogance turning to silence. Thompson picked up the clippers from the floor and turned them off. He glanced at Mills, who still held his phone. Delete it, Thompson ordered. Mills shook his head, trembling. It's already live. Ruth paused at the doorway. Good, she said softly. Let the world see what justice looks like before it wakes up. She stepped into the corridor, escorted by a stunned silence. Cameras caught her from the security booth, a figure walking through harsh light, head bowed, unafraid. Outside, the winter sky was breaking open with evening rain. Sirens wailed in the distance. Somewhere, on screens across the city, her image multiplied. She didn't flinch. She didn't look back. She just whispered, "Tomorrow?" The next morning, those same officers would stand beneath fluorescent lights again, this time in a courtroom, not a booking room. But that's not yet. Because before justice comes, there's always fallout. And as the first headlines exploded and the mayor's phone began to ring, something much darker was already moving behind the scenes, a plan to bury this before sunrise. Dawn came gray and restless. Seattle's skyline glimmered through drizzle, the kind of soft, colorless light that made the city look half awake, half guilty. Inside the police headquarters, fluorescent lamps burned late into the morning, throwing long, sterile shadows across the conference room walls. Chief Harlan stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled, coffee untouched. 2 phones buzzed in front of him, neither silenced. "The mayor wants answers," he snapped. "Why is this video everywhere? Who the hell is managing comms?" Public Affairs Director Levin looked like she hadn't slept. "It's been reposted on every platform: Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, even local Facebook groups. They're calling it the shaving." She slid her tablet across the table. 47 million views overnight. Harlan skimmed the comments flashing across the screen. She told them tomorrow they'd understand consequences. Judge Arimah? The same one who ruled on the Reynolds brutality case. They shaved a judge's head. Jesus! He cursed under his breath. Get legal. Get the union. We're containing this before the press conference at 10. But some stories can't be contained. Across town, in a small apartment overlooking the pier, Ruth sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Steam coiled upward like memory. Her daughter Nia stood by the window, phone in hand, scrolling through chaos. "Mom, it's everywhere," she whispered. "They're showing your face, the whole thing." Ruth's reflection in the glass looked almost unrecognizable, shaved head hidden beneath a dark scarf, eyes sunken but bright. "Let them show it," she said quietly. "Truth isn't ugly. It's just hard to look at." Nia turned, fighting tears. "You shouldn't go to court today. They'll twist everything. Say you provoked it, say you." Ruth reached for her daughter's hand. "If I don't stand there, the lie wins." She rose, straightened her coat, and slipped a flash drive into her pocket, the backup of every file, every recording she'd copied from the intake clerk who'd sent her the data at 3 a.m. The message had been simple: "You were right. Everything's on tape." At headquarters, panic bred improvisation. The union rep, Morrison, burst through the door in his expensive suit, already sweating. "We'll argue confusion of identity," he said. She was in civilian clothes, maybe intoxicated, maybe impersonating. Levin cut him off. "You can't spin that video. The camera doesn't blink." Harlan slammed his palm on the table. "Then we pivot. We question her judgment. Frame it like she inserted herself into an ongoing protest. Maybe she crossed lines." "Chief," Levin said, voice low, "she is the line." For a moment, no one spoke. The sound of rain against the glass filled the room. Meanwhile, the courthouse lobby swelled with reporters. Microphones glinted like bayonets. Every face carried the same question: will she show? She did. Ruth Arimah entered through the side door at 9:15 a.m., flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals who had volunteered, unofficially, to protect her. The crowd turned as one, cameras erupting in flashes. Someone shouted, "Judge Arimah, how does it feel to be the face of justice reform?" Another voice followed, "Do you intend to press charges?" She paused, her voice carrying through the marble hall. "I intend to let the law speak for itself. Something it hasn't done in a long time." The crowd murmured. She continued walking. Inside her chambers, files were stacked like fortifications. On her desk lay a letter marked confidential, internal affairs. She opened it, scanning fast, suspension recommended pending review. Her jaw tightened. Of course. She pressed the intercom. "James, call the clerk's office. I need the full docket for State versus Danner and State versus Mills pulled forward." We're moving sentencing to today. Her clerk hesitated. Your Honor, they're still processing the arrest. Then they can process it in my courtroom. Outside, the protests grew louder. Dozens became hundreds. Signs waved through rain. Justice for Ruth. Accountability now. They shaved a judge, they exposed a system. In the crowd, Thompson, the intake officer, stood hooded and trembling. He'd come on his lunch break, guilt gnawing at him. When he'd first seen the video online, he thought it was a nightmare replaying itself. He hadn't meant to be part of it. But now, holding his phone, he whispered into a live stream, I was there. They knew who she was. The comments section exploded instantly. He's confirming it live. Whistleblower inside the jail. By noon, that clip had another 3 million views. Back in chambers, Nia paced while Ruth organized evidence. Mom, Chief Harlan's holding a press conference, Nia said, reading from her phone. He's saying they mistakenly detained a woman resembling Judge Arimah. He called it an unfortunate coincidence. Ruth gave a tired smile. Coincidence doesn't mock you. Coincidence doesn't shave your head for sport. Nia's voice cracked. Then show them. Show the world. Ruth nodded slowly. I intend to. She reached for the flash drive, plugged it into her computer, and watched as the footage unfolded frame by frame. The smirk, the shove, the clippers, the moment the laughter died. Then came the last seconds, where Thompson's voice trembled off camera. You idiots, that's Judge Arimah. Ruth's hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury contained too long. She turned to Nia. We're submitting this to federal court by 5. I want copies to every outlet that still believes in truth. At 2 p.m., in a broadcast room across town, Chief Harlan stood before cameras, face stern, jaw locked. The Seattle Police Department regrets yesterday's incident. However, preliminary findings suggest a case of mistaken identity under chaotic protest conditions. The department remains committed to accountability. He froze as a producer waved frantically from off-screen. Chief, you need to see this. Behind him, the monitors switched. The press feed was hijacked, no one knew by whom. The screen filled with the jail footage. Danner's voice, clear as glass. Look at that nappy mess. Then Ruth's voice. Tomorrow morning, you'll understand what real consequences feel like. Then Thompson's panicked shout. You idiots, that's Judge Arimah. Gasps erupted from reporters. Cameras rolled. The feed went national before anyone could cut it. Harlan's face drained of color. He stepped back, microphone still live. And the feed, he hissed. But it was too late. The internet had already claimed it. Within 30 minutes, the mayor's office issued a statement calling for immediate suspension of the involved officers and full transparency. But the public wanted more than statements. They wanted reckoning. By evening, candlelight vigils spread outside every courthouse in the state. People held up hairbrushes and clippers as symbols of defiance. #SheCut the system trended worldwide. That night, Ruth returned home to find an envelope slipped under her door. No return address. Inside, a single photo, her sitting on the jail bench, head bowed. Scrawled in marker across the bottom, You think you've won? We see everything. Nia gasped when she read it. Mom, they're threatening you. Ruth turned the photo over. On the back, faint smudges of ash. Police issue gloves left prints like that. Good, she said quietly. That means they're afraid. She looked out the window. Sirens wailed again, but these were different, closer, more urgent. She saw patrol cars speeding down Pine Street, lights flashing, headed toward the precinct. Something's happening, Nia whispered. To us. At that very moment, in the evidence room downtown, Thompson stood trembling beside the digital archive terminal. He had a drive in his hand, every unedited clip, every time code, every proof of what they'd done. And someone else stood behind him, voice low and threatening. Hand it over, or you'll never make it home tonight. Thompson hesitated. Sweat rolled down his temple. You can't bury this anymore, he said. It's too big. The man in the shadows smiled. We don't bury it. We erase it. A gun cocked. At exactly 10:27 p.m., Every camera feed in the evidence room went black. The official report would later call it a technical malfunction. But outside, under the dim streetlight, a figure ran, hood pulled low, flash drive clenched tight, headlights chasing him through the rain. Thompson didn't know if he'd make it to Ruth's door. He only knew one thing: she had to see what was on that drive before they found him. The first knock was polite, almost apologetic. 3 soft taps that barely reached the kitchen where Ruth and Nia sat with the television muted on a loop of their own lives. The second knock was urgent, knuckles against wood, a rhythm that said now or never. Nia moved first. "I'll get it." Ruth's voice stopped her. "Look through the peephole first." Nia did. "It's the intake clerk. Thompson. He looks." She didn't finish. Ruth was already at the chain, sliding it free. When the door opened, Thompson nearly fell across the threshold. His hoodie was soaked through, rain and sweat and something darker. One sleeve was torn. Blood had dried in a swipe across his cheek. He pressed a hand to his ribs like he was holding a cracked plate together. "They'll be here in minutes," he said, voice raw. "I ran every light from 4th to Pine." Ruth closed the door and locked it twice. "Sit," she said, guiding him to a chair. "Nia, towels." Thompson shook his head. "No time. Take it." He put a small black flash drive on the table like it was a detonator. Unedited evidence vault, body cams, audio, internal emails. And a list. Ruth's eyes flicked up. "A list?" He nodded, swallowing pain. 41 names. People subjected to enhanced intake by those 2 and 3 other officers. Hair cutting. Public strip searches. Fake charges to justify it. Nia's breath caught. "My God." Thompson leaned forward, both hands flat on the table to stop them from shaking. "They're not going to fight this in court, Judge. They're going to erase it in rooms with no cameras." "Someone tried," Ruth said, looking at his torn sleeve. He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Evidence room cameras went dark at 10:27. Technical malfunction. I backed it all up before they cut the power. They knew. A man I've never seen, no badge, no name." He waited until the screens blinked and said, "Hand it over." Nia handed him a glass of water. He drank as if the room were spinning. "I ran," he said simply. "And I didn't run to internal affairs. I ran here." Ruth picked up the flash drive. Even through the plastic, it felt warm, alive with the heat of thousands of corrupt seconds. She crossed to her laptop, plugged it in, and the folder structure bloomed across the screen: /jail_intake/raw_text_transcript//union_com/. She opened /union_com/ and pulled up a thread: managing judicial exposure. Names she recognized. Names she had sat beside at luncheons and city reform panels. Nia read over her shoulder. "Target them personally. Make them choose between family safety and court duty." Thompson's voice was barely a whisper. "There's more. Overtime fraud spreadsheets, burner phone logs. Payments from a cash business 2 blocks off Jackson, laundry storefront, no customers after noon, but the register never empties." Ruth scrolled through columns that looked like a ledger of sunsets. "These numbers don't lie." "Neither do the faces," he said, pointing to a file /intake_stillframes/victims/. Ruth clicked. Photo after photo appeared, women and men, heads shaved, eyes red, staring into a lens that would forget them by morning. "Not tonight." The buzzer downstairs rasped, harsh and sustained. Nia flinched. Thompson went still. Ruth muted the room with a glance. The buzzer came again, longer, followed by pounding somewhere below, boots against a security door. "Don't move," Ruth said. She stepped to the light switch and flicked everything off. The apartment fell into a soft, blue darkness, city glow shivering through rain-streaked windows. She pulled her phone and typed with her thumb, "U.S. and contact. Immediate extraction. Cogre. Address and file." The pounding below stopped. Silence settled like a trap. Thompson gripped the edge of the table. "If they come up." "They won't," Ruth said. But she felt the tremor in her own voice. She forced it flat. If they do, they'll find the law already here. Nia whispered, "Mum." "Bedroom closet," Ruth said. "Get the lockbox." Nia disappeared down the hall and returned with a metal case. Ruth opened it, revealing 3 things: a sealed envelope, an external SSD, and the slim silver phone she'd turned off the day she left the bench months ago. She held the SSD toward Thompson. "Duplicate," she said. "We image your drive now." "What if they cut the power again?" he asked. "Then they'll learn who wrote the emergency power redundancy policy for this building." She crossed to the wall and flipped a hidden panel. The generator hummed to life. A thin strip of light glowed behind the baseboards. She cloned the drive with practiced motions. Minutes stretched. On the screen, a progress bar crawled, the percentage ticking up like a heartbeat. 37%. 41%. 58%. Downstairs, the stairwell door slammed open. Footsteps in the stairwell, steady and unhurried. Nia's eyes widened. "They're inside." Ruth didn't look away from the screen. "This finishes first," she said. "Evidence before fear." The footsteps paused on their landing. A soft test of the handle. But a whisper through the crack. "Judge Arimah, open the door. We'd like to make this easy." Nia mouthed. Thompson's knuckles went white. Ruth pressed a finger to her lips. She traced a quick line in the dust on the table, 71%, like writing a prayer. The voice outside tried again, gentler, almost kind. "We only want to talk. You're making this bigger than it needs to be." Ruth said nothing. The copy climbed, 82%, 89%, 93%. The whisper turned to steel. "Open the door or we open it for you." The beat. Then another. The quiet filled with rain and the soft whir of a small fan beside the fridge. Somewhere down the block, a siren Dopplered past. On the screen, 100%. A small chime like a bell at the end of a long service. Ruth ejected both drives and slid Thompson's back to him. "Pocket. Now." The door shook as a shoulder hit it, then again, a practiced rhythm that had opened 100 doors that didn't want to open. The wood moaned. The chain held. 2 sharp knocks, different, crisp, official. A second voice, amplified. "U.S. Marshals. Step back from the door." Ruth exhaled. "They're here." The door stopped trembling. Hushed voices tangled in the hallway. The chain stayed taut, the deadbolt stayed sure. Then, "Judge Arimah? Marshal Reyes." She unlocked. 2 marshals entered, wet coats steaming, eyes sweeping the room. Reyes glanced at Thompson's sleeve, the blood, the flash drive on the table. "We should go. Now." "Not yet," Ruth said. She lifted the sealed envelope from the lockbox and handed it to Nia. "If anything happens to me, this goes to the Attorney General's office. Not the mayor. Not the chief. The AG." Nia shook her head. "Don't say." Ruth squeezed her hand. "Then hold it for me until morning." The marshals formed a wedge around them, moving fast down the dim hall, down the stairs that smelled like old paint and wet rope. On the second-floor landing, 2 men stood against the wall, plain clothes, cheap boots, breath steady. They let the marshals pass with expressions as blank as unmarked files. Their eyes were wrong, awake in a way that said they slept just fine after bad nights. On the street, rain lifted like a curtain. The city had found its voice again. Sirens, tires, the soft chimes of tram wires singing in the wind. Reyes opened the back door of an unmarked car. "Judge first." Ruth paused with one foot in the car and turned to Thompson. "You did the right thing." He nodded once, like a man signing his own name for the first time. "Make it mean something." "It already does." They pulled away, tires slicking water into arrowheads. Nia watched their building recede, the window of their living room a small, dark square in a grid of lives. Inside that square, the light behind the baseboards still glowed. "Courthouse?" Reyes asked, eyes on the mirror. "No," Ruth said. "Not yet. The union will be waiting there with cameras and condolences. We go to someone who doesn't owe them anything." "Who's that?" "An old friend who never liked velvet ropes." They drove south, rain thinning to mist. The city's glass towers gave way to brick and neon, to mom-and-pop stores with metal grates still half down, to a long white building at the waterline with no sign and too many antennas. Reyes pulled into a backlot. The security door clicked open as if it had been expecting them. Inside, the room was warmer than it should have been. A woman with salt-streaked hair stood at a folding table strewn with hard drives. She wore no badge, no insignia, just the calm of someone who had watched too many lies try to outlive the morning. "Agent Carter," Ruth said. "Judge." Carter nodded. Her eyes went to the drive in Ruth's hand, then to Thompson's split knuckles. "We've been ready since 5 a.m. Ruth set the drive on the table. "This is everything." Carter slid it into a bay. Screens bloomed awake, a command center built from stubbornness and grant money. Feeds. Timelines. GPS logs. The jail's interior schematic glowed like a skeleton on X-ray. "Start with the intake room," Ruth said. "Then the union threads. Then the overtime books." Carter's fingers moved, already pulling mirrors to 3 off-site servers. If someone shuts us down, they shut down 3 universities and a library in Ohio. Thompson exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since the stairwell. "So this is safe." "For the first time," Carter said, "this is safer than the people who made it." On one screen, Danner's face froze mid-laugh. On another, a spreadsheet crawled with numbers like ants. On a third, an email thread with a subject line that felt like confession. Narrative strategy, judge it. Carter tapped a key. The audio filled the room. Target them personally. Make them choose between family safety and court duty. Nia flinched. Tears gathered and didn't fall. "Tomorrow," Ruth said almost to herself, "we pull their mask off in front of the whole city." Carter looked up, gaze steady. "That means you show up. They'll try to stop you. They already tried." She felt the scarf around her head, the absence beneath it like a weather pattern. She imagined each coil on that concrete floor as a bead on a rosary, each one a name she didn't know yet. 41 names. Maybe more. "Judge," Reyes said, phone pressed to his ear, voice suddenly tight. "We've got chatter. Someone filed an emergency petition with the state Supreme Court to suspend you from the bench pending investigation." "When?" Ruth asked. 30 minutes ago. The hearing's been set for 7 a.m. tomorrow. Before your docket." Nia's hand found Ruth's. "They're trying to bench you before you bench them." Carter's screens kept copying, cold and relentless. Progress bars crawled like dawn finding the edges of buildings. Ruth stood straighter. "Then we move first." She turned to Thompson. "You'll testify?" He swallowed. "Yes." "To everything?" "To everything." "Good." She faced Carter. "We go public at 6. Not a press conference. Evidence. We stream the files live with context. No spin. No lace. Then I walk into that hearing with the city at my back." "You're declaring war," Carter said. "No," Ruth answered. "I'm declaring daylight." Outside, the rain finally stopped. The city was so quiet it felt like holding its own pulse between fingers. For a moment, no one spoke. They only listened to the hum of drives swallowing truth faster than fear could destroy it. Reyes checked the window, then his watch. "We can get you home under escort. Rotate vehicles. Change routes twice." Ruth nodded. "Take Nia. I'll follow with Carter." Nia hesitated. "I'm not leaving you." "You're not," Ruth said, pressing the sealed envelope into her daughter's hand. "You're delivering this letter to the Attorney General's office. It's my sworn statement. If they stop me, it doesn't stop." Nia held the envelope like a small, beating thing. "I'll run every light from 4th to Pine." Ruth smiled, and the smile was the only warm thing in the room. "You'll drive, Nia. We don't run anymore." They moved again, a choreography of urgency and purpose. Thompson wiped his hands on his jeans and stood taller. "Judge," he said. "Yes. If the city stands up tomorrow, will it stand up the day after?" His voice held the tremor of a man who had seen crusades fold in the first strong wind. Ruth met his eyes. "If it doesn't, we make it." Carter's console chimed, final copy complete. Backups stacked like fortifications you couldn't knock down with a press release. She turned one monitor toward Ruth. "There's something else you should see." On the screen, a low-res security clip from an alley behind the Union Building, time-stamped 1 hour earlier. Morrison stepped into frame, phone at his ear, listening. He nodded once and said, "If the judge makes it to 7 a.m., we've lost." A second figure moved past the edge of the camera, only a shoulder, a hand. Familiar. Sickening. Danner. Morrison's voice lowered. "Then she can't make it to 7. The room went colder than rain. Ruth closed her eyes for one heartbeat, then opened them, clear. "They think I'll flinch." Carter's jaw set. "Will you?" Ruth tied her scarf tighter. "No." Her phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number. "We see everything." Under it, a photo snapped through a windscreen, 2 silhouettes in the back of a car, one with a scarf, one with a ponytail. "Nia." Reyes looked up, already moving. "Phone's off. We move now." Ruth slipped the drives into the inside pocket of her coat, closer to her pulse than any name badge had ever been. She faced the door as if it were a witness stand. "Tomorrow," she said, to the room, to the city, to the men in the alley and the shadows in stairwells, "I walk in. And so does the truth." The lights flickered once, twice, grid stress or a warning, no one could tell. The backup glow held. They stepped into the corridor. Morning broke sharp and cold, slicing through the city's fog like a verdict finally read aloud. At 6:47 a.m., the courthouse steps were already flooded, protesters wrapped in coats and conviction. Homemade signs trembled in the breeze. "We are Ruth. Truth has no hair to hide behind. Justice wakes early." Camera crews jostled for position as reporters rehearsed their intros. Inside, the marble halls smelled of coffee and adrenaline. The courtroom clock above the bench ticked toward 7. Behind a set of double oak doors, Ruth Arimah stood still, the scarf around her head a quiet flag. Nia stood beside her, clutching the sealed envelope no longer sealed, its contents already delivered to the Attorney General at dawn. Agent Carter waited near the door, earbud in, hand resting near her holster. Thompson sat in the gallery's first row, pale but resolute. Ruth looked at him, then at the bench through the cracked door. "We walk in together," she said. Carter nodded once. Streamings live. Every major outlet, all synced. The moment felt impossibly small, just footsteps and breath. But she knew, some mornings the weight of a city fits inside a heartbeat. She pushed the doors open. The room fell silent. Every seat was filled. Judges. Reporters. Citizens. Some came for spectacle, some for truth, most for both. The state's attorney rose. "Your Honor, we are here to consider a motion to suspend Judge Arimah pending investigation." Ruth raised a hand. "That motion has already been superseded by evidence submitted to federal authorities at 6 o'clock this morning. What this court will consider instead is truth." Gasps rippled through the gallery. She turned toward the projection screen behind her. "Agent Carter." Carter clicked the remote. The lights dimmed. The footage filled the wall. The same intake room, the same laughter, the same cold buzz of clippers. The room watched Danner and Mills drag the blades across Ruth's hair. Every cut landed like thunder. When the moment came, Thompson's voice trembling, "You idiots, that's Judge Arimah." The crowd exhaled as one body. Ruth didn't flinch. She let the silence breathe. Then she spoke. "They thought I was powerless because I looked like a woman without a home. But home is not a house. It's dignity. It's the right to be treated as human. That right does not depend on uniform, rank, or race. It depends on conscience." She gestured to the evidence table. "And conscience, ladies and gentlemen, is on trial today." Morrison, the union rep, shifted in his seat. Sweat marked the edges of his collar. Beside him sat Danner and Mills. No uniforms now, just 2 men in suits that didn't fit right anymore. Their faces were drawn, hollow. "Officer Danner," Ruth said evenly, "you said procedure is what you say it is. Do you still believe that?" He hesitated, then forced himself upright. "Who was following orders?" "Whose?" He looked down. Ruth pressed. The order that told you a black woman's pain is your entertainment? Or the one that told you cruelty is policy? His jaw trembled. I didn't know who you were. And if I had been who you thought I was? Ruth asked softly. If I were just another woman sleeping under an overpass, would it have mattered less? He had no answer. Only shame. The prosecutor rose, reading from the new evidence Carter had mirrored across federal servers. Financial fraud. Coordinated intimidation. Threats traced to union accounts. Every word landed like hammer blows. When the reading ended, Ruth turned back to Danner. You once told a camera, I've got all the rights I need. She paused. Today, I'll show you what rights actually look like. The bailiff handed her a sealed folder. Inside were 2 warrants, federal and state. She signed both in front of everyone, her pen steady. Officer Mills, Officer Danner, Mr. Morrison, she said. You are hereby remanded to custody for conspiracy, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice. Gasps erupted. Cameras flashed. Danner rose, face pale. Judge, please, my wife, my kids. Ruth's voice softened, almost kind. Then teach them better. Let the lesson start with you. He opened his mouth again, but no words came. The bailiffs cuffed them quietly, professionally. As they were led out, the clatter of chains against marble was the loudest sound in the room. Morrison stumbled, looking back once, at the protesters outside the windows, at the banners waving like conscience made visible. For the first time, his face cracked open with realization. Not anger, not pride, just a man seeing the wreckage he'd helped build. His lips moved soundlessly. I'm sorry. After the arrests, Ruth stepped from the bench, walking to the very edge of the platform until she stood level with everyone else. This was never just my case, she said. It's about the 41 names on those files, the thousands who never made it to a courtroom. It's about the officers who still believe humanity stops where their authority begins. And it's about every one of you who watched and said, that's just how it is. She paused, looking into the sea of faces. Because when you accept injustice quietly, you help it breathe. Outside, the crowd began to chant. The sound climbed through the courthouse glass, steady, rhythmic, alive. Justice for Ruth. Justice for all. Reporters leaned in. Your Honor, one called out, what happens now? Ruth smiled faintly. Now we build something that can't be shaved away. Later that evening, as the sun bled gold into the horizon, Ruth sat on the courthouse steps alone. The protests had turned into a vigil, candles flickering in glass jars, people singing softly. Nia joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. You did it, Nia whispered. No, Ruth said. We did it. She reached up, untying the scarf. The cool air touched her scalp. For a heartbeat she looked fragile, then the streetlights caught her face, and she looked unbreakable. Nia smiled through tears. Will you grow it back? Ruth's eyes stayed on the skyline. Maybe, but I might keep it short for a while. A reminder. Of what? That sometimes, when they strip everything away, they reveal who you were meant to be. They sat there together as the city lights blinked awake, the hum of traffic mixing with distant applause. Inside the jail across town, Danner and Mills sat in separate cells. Danner stared at his reflection in the scratched steel mirror. He thought about every time he'd laughed at someone's pain. About his father's badge hanging on the wall at home, and the son who asked him last week what justice meant. For the first time, he had no easy answers, only a hollow ache that sounded like truth trying to grow. He whispered to no one, I didn't know. The echo came back, soft but firm. You should have. By the next morning, the Department of Justice announced a task force named after Ruth, the Arimah Accountability Initiative, to review excessive force cases nationwide. The headline on the city paper read, She lost her hair. She found a nation's conscience. Ruth read it once, folded it neatly, and set it aside. Then she opened her laptop and began drafting her next docket, public hearing on police reform procedures, open to all. The sound of typing filled the room, steady, unhurried, like rebuilding. Nia entered with coffee. Mom, People are commenting like crazy. The live stream hit 20 million views overnight. They're calling it the day justice stood up. Ruth smiled, eyes still on the screen. Good. Let them stand with it. She finished her final sentence, then looked straight into the camera still streaming live to the world. If you've ever been silenced, mocked, or made to feel small, she said softly, remember this, dignity doesn't die when someone takes it from you. It dies only when you stop believing you deserve it. She leaned closer, voice steady, alive. So tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Because somewhere out there, another story like mine is beginning. And maybe, when it does, you'll be the one who stands up first. She held the gaze for a heartbeat longer. Then a small smile. Don't forget to subscribe if you believe in stories that fight back. Like this video. Share it. And tell someone that justice, when it finally speaks, doesn't whisper. It roars.